Your raised hand icon will only be lowered when you have spoken. You will be invited to speak in order in which hands are raised. Please unmute your microphone when I invite you to speak and mute it again when you have finished speaking. Please note that this meeting will be live streamed through the Council's YouTube channel this morning. Please be mindful, therefore, that members of the public following the meeting via the live stream will be able to see each of us on screen. In order in which hands are raised, please unmute your microphone when I invite you to speak and mute it again when you have finished speaking. Right. Please note that this meeting will be live streamed through the Council's YouTube channel this morning. Hold on a second. Please be mindful, therefore, that members of the public following the meeting via the live stream will be able to see each of us on screen. In order in which hands are raised, please unmute your microphone when I invite you to speak. Right, that's that. All right. Please announce yourself by name when speaking, and if you want to refer to anything in the officer's report, can you please first clearly state the relevant page number and paragraph number. Okay, are we all here? Anybody else coming in at all, Sonia, at all? No? Not at the moment. I'll let them in if they arrive partway through, Carol. Okay. Okay, is the live opening remarks? Once live stream started, is the live stream starting? Is it on? Hold on, and I'll just double check for you. Thank you. Yes, it's fine. Okay. Morning, councillors. Welcome to Rochford District Council's remote licensing and appeals committee meeting, and welcome to anyone watching this via live stream. Agenda item 1, apologies for absence. Have we any apologies at all, Sonia? There are none in the office. Councillor Mrs Mason's hand is raised. Councillor Mrs Mason, do you want to say something?
Yes, thank you, Councillor Weston. Councillor Neil Hookway sends his apologies. He's had an unexpected emergency.
Thank you, Councillor Mrs Mason. Thank you. Any other apologies? Agenda item 2, any substitute members at all? None. Item number 3, non-members attending? None. Item 4, to receive declarations of interest? There are none. Item 5, consultation on the statement of the licensing policy. To consider the report of the Assistant Director, People and Communities outlining changes to the statement of licensing policy from the current 2016-2021 policy and requesting permission to open the consultation with relevant partners and interested parties. And I believe Steve, I think Steve Green, is it? Steve Green's going to do the report, if that's okay. Thank you.
Good morning. Hopefully everyone can hear me. Good morning. The introduction is in relation to the Licensing Act Part 1, Section 5 of the Act, that states that each licensing authority must determine its policy with respect to the exercise of its licensing function and publish a statement of that policy before the beginning of that period. As outlined in 3.1 of the documentation, Part 1, Section 5.3 of the Act states that before determining its policy, a licensing authority must consult with a number of interested parties, including the Chief Officer of Police for the licensing authority area, the Fire Authority for the area, such persons as the licensing authority considers to be representative of holders of premises license issued by that authority, such persons as the licensing authority considers to be representative holders of club premises certificates issued by the authority, such persons as the licensing authority considers to be representative of holders of personal licenses issued by the authority, and such other persons as the licensing authority considers to be representative of businesses and residents in the area. Part 1, Section 5(6) of the Act states that where revisions are made, the licensing authority must publish a statement of the revisions and the revising licensing statement. The policy has generally remained the same as the previous publication, with the exception of the Community of Impact policy. The Community of Impact policy has been removed due to the lack of evidence to support the such policy. However, this has been replaced with a new paragraph that states those applications within the district for a new premises license or club premises certificates or variations that are likely to add to the existing impact will require the applicant to demonstrate why the operation of the premises involved will not add to the impact already being experienced. The results of the consultation will be reported to the Licensing and Appeals Committee later this year, prior to the ratification by the Council in December. And Appendix B is the timetable for the consultation period. The risks identified relate to the Community of Impact policy, that this has been amended due to the lack of evidence and support of the policy. However, paragraph 2.39 reduces the risk by requesting those applications within the district to require the applicant to demonstrate how the operation of their premises involved will not add to the already impact that's being experienced. There is no resource implications associated with the circulation of the draft statement of policy, and the Council's current statement of licensing policy is required to be reviewed every 5 years in accordance with the Licensing Act. Under a equality impact assessment, it has been completed and they found that there is no impacts, either positive or negative, on protective groups as defined under the Equalities Act of 2010. It is proposed that the committee resolves that the draft statement of licensing policy, Appendix 1, to be approved for consultation with the relevant interested parties, and 2, that the likely timetable for the consultation period to be noted. And that's the conclusion of the report.
Thank you, Stephen. Councillor Mike Wilkinson, you wanted to ask a question.
Thank you, Chairman. Can you hear me? Making sure I just unmuted myself. Thank you. I just wanted to ask Stephen a question, if I may. The paragraph that's been inserted, which is currently in your report at paragraph 3.3, Stephen, which it talks about the applications within the district, etc., etc. I just wanted to understand, make sure I understand this. Would I be right in thinking then that if this were implemented, that future applications such as the one which is currently being considered for the Red Door in Rayleigh, that because there's massive, well, not massive, there's loads of conditions that are being considered with regards to that application, that any application such as that would have to show, well, this is what the impact on the local area is at the moment. And if we are to extend our hours into this, and the other, this is a potential impact in the future. Am I right? Have I read that correctly?
Yes, I can confirm that they will be expected to do a full risk assessment of what impact their business is going to have on the surrounding areas at the present time and for the future. So yes. Okay,
and one further question, Chairman, if I may, is so if this is ratified today, we do resolve this today, so this becomes policy, will this then affect that licensing decision from this day forward, or only those applications that are received from this day forward? Does that make sense?
This will be implemented from the date of when the policy is actually implemented, which I believe is in January. to see whether Sonia's actually got the,
She's nodding her head.
is it January 2021 is when the
Oh.
implementation?
If I can assist, the purpose of today is that this will be approved for going out to public consultation. When the public consultation has actually been completed, it will then come back to this committee later in the autumn, late October, November time. I think we've got a meeting already scheduled. And then, you know, any responses that are received during that consultation period will be considered by the committee. And after that, the policy will go to full council for ratification for adoption in January.
Makes perfect sense. Thank you, Chairman.
Councillor Mr. Hoy, you wanted to ask a question?
Thank you, Chairman. You say that there's lack of evidence to support the policy. What efforts have you? What do you mean by that? Can you go a bit more depth of that? Obviously, the policy as was the community impact policy said effectively says that effectively we're saying you can't develop or you can't add to the nighttime economy or that sort of economy unless you can absolutely prove there will not be an effect. Obviously, this policy is much weaker than that, the new one. And I just want you've said there's a lack of evidence to support the policy as it was. I want to know what work you've done to check that evidence and what evidence there was. On top of that, you also state there was a lack of support for that policy. Can you say who did not support the policy?
Yes, just to sort of break down a little bit more around community impact policies to provide a little bit of clarity around it. For a community impact policy to be in place, there must be evidence from Essex Police to show that there is significant crime and disorder within the area at the time prior to the policy being submitted. The previous policy, which is currently in place, was when there was a lot of development taking place within the town, and there was significant evidence at the time to show that this policy needs to be supported to restrict and provide more scrutiny around any future applications that were being submitted. Since that time, there hasn't been the evidence provided by statistical information that the police have to show that there is that still significant risk, and therefore there is the lack of evidence statistically to show crime and disorder to carry on with the current measures. However, by us implementing this replacement condition, still has a requirement under our policy for the premises or new applicants to demonstrate what measures they're going to put in place to try and reduce the risks. Does that help?
Yeah, and also the lack of support. Just for your information, I think it was myself and Councillor Hudson who actually proposed the policy in the first place. So that's interesting. Could you just say, was it the police came to us and said there's no evidence, or did we approach the police asking for evidence? And also about the support, you said lack of support.
Yes, it was myself that approached Essex Police asking for information, statistical information, to determine whether to continue with the community impact policy or whether there was insufficient evidence. They said, unfortunately, there was insufficient evidence from the licensing team of Essex Police that could provide support for continuing with the current measures.
So basically, it's the police did not support the policy, is what you're saying? When you say lack of support, is that the case?
Yes, under statistical information.
Or,
yes.
Right, the police. Right, okay.
Yes.
Sorry, my mute's playing up. Thank you.
Oh, Councillor Mr. Hoy. Yes.
Yeah, that was all. There was something else in my head, but I can't. It's gone from my head at the moment, so I'll leave that one. Thank you.
You can always come back. Councillor Mrs. Mason, please. You want a question?
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, I'd like to address this to the officer. There's small points, but I would like clarity on them. On his report under 3.1, I think he's picked this up when he was reading it out by hesitation. There's a duplication there in bullet point 3 and 5. Can he just confirm that is a duplication and it shouldn't be another person or a group of people that we're meant to be referring to?
Yes, I think you quite rightly pointed out, there is actually a duplication in the report, and it should just be those that are personal license holders, those that are holding a premises license, those that are holding a club premises certificate, and any other persons as the licensing authority considers to be representative of businesses and local residents.
Right, so the duplication of the premises licence issued by that authority is purely a duplication and shouldn't read otherwise. Thank you for that clarification.
Yes.
On the same point, it says that the licensing authority must consult with such other persons as the licensing authority considers to be representative of businesses and residents in that area. Can you give an indication of how you determine which businesses and residents you go out to and which groups are included? For example, do you include parish councils?
Yes, I can confirm that this is a full consultation. So we'll go out to residents, businesses, and we'll go via the parish councils as well to obviously try and spread the request for as many responses as we can across the district.
Yeah, thank you. If I can just ask for some clarification on that point. You're saying residents. How are you going out to residents? I mean, presumably, are you going to write to every address? What means of communication are you using? Because we've got 80-odd thousand residents. I doubt that you're writing to each of them.
No, what we'll be using is we'll be using our communications team to announce press releases, and also as well we'll be using social media. And if there is anyone obviously that hasn't got access to those sort of facilities, then obviously we will be using community groups as well to try and make sure that we have a wide range of responses across the district.
Thank you. And lastly, this is just a matter for clarification. On reading the report, I find that certain paragraphs are bolded. Are they bolded because there's some alteration in there, or are they bolded to give emphasis to that paragraph? And if so, how do you determine that emphasis, please?
Yes, there is key paragraphs that have been bolded out within the document. We have done that for a specific reason, to actually draw the attention to anyone that is looking at submitting an application to focus on those key points, but they are actually then broken down in more detail further within the document. So this is really just to highlight the key points that they need to certainly show evidence when submitting their application.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Mr Mason. Councillor Mr Hoy, you want to come back?
Yeah, thank you. It was around the consultation, so I won't re-ask the questions that Councillor Mrs Mason has asked. However, it's you've sort of touched on it. Will you use or direct people from the use of it, social media, for the consultation? And how will you measure the response to the consultation? What's an acceptable response? Anything we get back, or does it have to meet a certain standard?
We'll be using all types of media, as you've mentioned, through our communications team. We will obviously collate the information, and then we will then obviously present the reports back to you with the findings. We will have a look to see whether there is repetition of certain sort of comments that obviously we can then sort of summarise to say we have had so many with the same responses, but we will obviously provide you with the full sort of report if you wish to see the full breakdown of all the responses, but we'll certainly give you a summary so you don't have to sort of scrutinise too much of the information yourself. So,
yeah, thank you.
Thank you, councillors. Are there any more questions at all, councillors? Okay, at the end of the report, on page 5.2, there are two recommendations. I move that we accept these recommendations. The first one is that the draft statement of licensing policy, Appendix A, be approved for consultation with all relevant interested parties. I'm going to do the first one first. If we vote on the first recommendation, if you're happy to do that, members, I will ask Sonia to call out names and indicate if you're happy to do the first recommendation, if that's okay, Sonia.
Chairman, if I may, just for clarity, I'll second that proposal so that at least it's recorded.
Thank you, Councillor Wilkinson. Sonia? Sonia, your mic's on.
Mic's off.
Councillor Refty, would you like a recorded vote, and also would you like to vote for, against or abstain?
No recorded vote. For.
Thank you. Councillor Mrs Gooding, would you like a recorded vote, or would you like to vote for, against or abstain?
No recorded vote and for. Thank you.
Thank you. So, Councillor Hoy, would you like a recorded vote, or would you like to vote for, against or abstain?
Against, recorded vote for the motion.
Thank you. Councillor Lucas Gill, would you like a recorded vote, or would you like to vote for, against or abstain?
No to the recorded vote and yes to the motion.
Thank you. Councillor Mrs McPherson, would you like a recorded vote, and would you like to vote for, against or abstain?
No recorded vote and for. Thank you.
Councillor Mrs Mason, would you like a recorded vote, and would you like to vote for, against or abstain?
Against the recorded vote, for the motion. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Merrick, would you like a recorded vote, and would you like to vote for, against or abstain?
No recorded vote. For.
Thank you. Councillor Mrs Shaw, would you like to a recorded vote, and would you like to vote for, against or abstain?
No recorded vote and for the motion.
Thank you. Councillor Shaw, would you like a recorded vote, and would you like to vote for, against or abstain?
No recorded vote for the motion.
Councillor Mrs Weston, would you like a recorded vote, and would you like to vote for, against or abstain?
Recorded vote and for the motion, Chair. Thank you.
Councillor Wilkinson, recorded vote for, against or abstain?
No recorded vote and for the motion. Thank you.
Thank you. And Councillor Williams, would you like a recorded vote for, against or abstain?
Against and for, please.
Thank you.
I believe that's carried. Is that right? Thank you.
Yeah, it's unanimous.
The second recommendation, councillors, that the likely timetable for the consultation period be noted Appendix B. I move that. Have I a seconder on that, please?
Yes, I can second you that.
I'll second.
Thank you. Sonia, would you like to do the prelims again, please?
Of course. So, Councillor FD, recorded vote for, against or abstain?
Against and for.
Thank you. Councillor Mrs Gooding, recorded vote for, against or abstain?
No recorded vote and for the motion.
Thank you. Councillor Hoy, recorded vote for, against or abstain?
Against, recorded vote for the motion.
Thank you. Councillor Lucas Gill, recorded vote for, against or abstain?
No to the recorded vote and for the motion.
Thank you. Councillor Mrs McPherson, recorded vote for, against or abstain? Councillor Mrs McPherson?
I'm doing my next one. No recorded vote and for. Thank you.
Councillor Mrs Mason, recorded vote for, against or abstain?
Yes, Madam Chairman, no recorded vote and for the motion. Thank you.
Councillor Merrick, recorded vote for, against or abstain?
No and for.
Thank you. Councillor Mrs Shaw, recorded vote for, against or abstain?
No recorded vote for the motion.
Thank you. Councillor Shaw, recorded vote for, against or abstain?
No recorded vote for the motion.
Thank you. Councillor Mrs Weston, recorded vote for, against or abstain?
No recorded vote and for the motion.
Thank you. Councillor Wilkinson, recorded vote for, against or abstain?
No and for.
Thank you. And Councillor Williams, recorded vote for, against or abstain?
No and for the motion. Thank you.
Thank you. That's carried.
I believe that is fully carried, members. Thank you very much. Agenda item 6, a proposal for an increase to the Hackney carriage tariff by reducing the yardage. Mr. Greener, the council's licensed officer, will present the report again. Thank you.
Thank you. This is a proposal from the licensing trade, from the Hackney Carriage taxi trade, to increase the current Hackney Carriage tariff fare that has been in place since April 2017. The proposal for reviewing the fare is to set out in section 65 of the Local Government Miscellaneous Provisions Act 1976. Following the requirements of the Act, the Council's licensing team undertook formal consultation with the trade and the public on the proposals for the increase, with a summary of responses set out in paragraphs 3.7 to 3.12 below. The final stage of the formal process required by the Act is to bring the matter to the Licensing and Appeals Committee for a decision. It is the matter for the committee to make the decision to increase the fares as per the trade's proposals set out in this report, or alternatively, to not make any increase at this time. A copy of the process flowchart for reviewing fare increases in accordance with the Act can be found at Appendix A. The decision being recommended is that the trade has proposed the increase to the authorised fare tariffs for Hackney carriages as outlined in Appendix B of this report. It is a matter for the committee to accept or reject the proposal, taking into account the contents of this report. If the committee is minded to approve the proposed increase, the committee is further asked to agree that the decision on which date the increased fares are to be implemented be delegated to the Assistant Director of Peoples and Communities in consultation with the portfolio holder for licensing, provided that the implementation date shall be no later than the end of February 2021. The reason for the increase proposed by the trade: on the 9th of January 2020, the trade requested an increase to the authorised fare tariffs. This has been requested is set out at Appendix C in the report. In summary, the trade's contention was that although inflation has remained reasonably low in the UK over the last 3 years, prices of goods and services have still gone up since the last fare increase in 2017. The trade states that using an inflation calculator, every £1 spent in 2016 to 2017 now costs an average of £1 and 9.098, based on the average inflation increase of 3.2% a year. Trade further urges the pensions increase are linked to inflation, and there is evidence of wage growth over the last few years. The trade maintain that an increase would also be in line with other transportation industries, such as rail fares increases, which are linked to inflation. The trade did not produce any evidence or statistical data to support their application, so it is not clear what inflation measures they have used. However, the Office of National Statistics data on CPI levels since 2017 show that CPI has constantly been below 3% for this period. If the committee are minded to accept the trade's proposal increase, the fares would be affected and set out in the table that's listed under 3.2. In accordance with the Act, on 14th of February 2020, the licensing team sent out an email to all Hackney carriage drivers outlining the proposal for the fare increase. An online survey was created to record the details of the survey. Paper copies of the questions were sent to the drivers that we did not hold a valid email address. The consultation for the online entries was concluded on the 1st of February 2020, and the postal entries concluded on the 16th of February 2020 to allow sufficient time for responses. A copy of the letter sent out to the drivers showing the question is attached as Appendix D. The survey was sent out to all Hackney Carriage licensed drivers, 247 of them, and 56% of the drivers responded, which was 139 drivers. The results showed that 84.9% of the drivers supported the increase and 15.1% drivers did not feel that they could support it. Based on the results and in accordance with the Act, the matter was then taken to the next stage, which was the public consultation. The public consultation started on the 10th of March 2020 with a press release from the council, and a web banner was placed on the council's website. The consultation was open to members of the public using an online form to collate the responses. It was proposed to allow members of the public to submit their comments in person. However, the current restrictions prevented us from offering this service, and signage was placed on the high street and widely advertised on social media. A copy of the questions proposed to the public can be found in Appendix E. The consultation period concluded on the 20th of April 2020, a minimum of 30 days as required by the Act. During the consultation period, the council received 68 responses from members of the public. A copy of the responses is attached as Appendix F and redacted as necessary to comply with the requirements of the Data Protection Act 2018. In summary, the majorities of those that responded were over the age of 60 and over, 47.1%, and most were in full-time employment, 42.6%, followed closely by those that were retired, 41.2%. The survey found 38.2% of those that had responded supported the fare increase, and 61.8% did not support the change. The majority of the comments for not supporting the fare increase were relating to the perception that taxis were already expensive, and a few examples of the comments were listed under 3.13. We did approach the trade for a statement from the Recognised Trades Association. Under 4.1, there was no formal comments from the Recognised Trade Association, known as the Voice of Reason. The only request which was made is that the committee supports the increase, and implementation of the increase should be delayed because of the current COVID-19 situation. And there is a recommendation that the decision on which date the increased fares to be implemented to be delegated to the Assistant Director of Peoples and Communities in consultation with the portfolio holder for licensing, provided the implementation date is no later than the end of February 2021. In addition to the representations made by the trade and the outcome of the two consultations, the following information is available to the committee to assist you in making your decision making. 5.2 shows a comparison with other licensing authorities within Essex. The magazine, the Private Hire Taxi magazine, publishes a nationwide fare comparison chart, and that can be seen as Appendix G. Below is the extract from the chart showing the comparisons across Greater Essex. Colchester is currently at the highest point at £6.80 for every 2 mile fare, and Rochford currently sits at £6.20 with the proposed increase at £6.40. As of April 2019, the current national average is £5.98, with Rochford was the 7th most expensive authority within Essex. The proposed increase would make the fare for 2 miles £6.40. This would be the same of that of Harlow and Southend Borough Council that have also had a fare tariff increase recently. At present, Colchester is the highest at £6.80 for the 2 mile fare, and Epping Forest being the lowest at £5.50. To assist you, I've included as well from the Office of National Statistics the petrol prices, the contestation made by the trade that the cost of fuel has increased since the date of the last fare increase is not fully borne out of the evidence, although fuel price costs did increase during the period since 2017, they are now lower than the 2017. In the first quarter of 2017, the date of the last fare increase, the average cost of unleaded fuel was £1.19 per litre. Since that time, the cost of fuel increased, reaching a high of £1.28 in quarter 3 of 2018, before decreasing to a low of £1.09 in quarter 2 of 2020. And the chart is within 5.5, which shows the breakdown of the costs of fuel. And the full report can be found on the Office of National Statistics website. There are 6 companies that provide this information, 4 oil companies and 2 supermarkets that take part in the weekly fuel price surveys, providing the ULSP, which is the unleaded petrol and diesel and super unleaded fuel prices, and it covers around 65% of the market. The CPI, also known as Consumer Price Index, again, which is sourced from the Office of National Statistics. The chart is shown at 5.6. The chart shows a steady decrease of the CPHI measures of the consumer price inflation following a peak in August 2017, and the CPHI remaining below 3% over this period. This means that the average prices have increased since 2017, but at a rate less than 3% per annum. Again, the latest report can be found under the Consumer Price Inflation UK March 2020, outlines the price indexes. In 5.9, the report directly states the relation to transport. Over the last 2 years, the contribution from transport has shown more variation than any other group, ranging from 0.75 in August 2018 to 0.07 in September 2019. Much of the movement comes from the changes to the price of motor fuel, though contributions from airfares and second-hand cars have also changed over this period. The contribution from transport was 0.16% points in March 2020, while within this total, motor fuels have made downward contribution of 0.06% points. Average petrol price stood at £1.19.4 per litre in March 2020, the lowest observed since February 2019, while the average diesel price were £1.23.8 pence per litre, the lowest since March 2018. The data shows that while there has been increases over the period since the last fare increase were implemented, the council cannot substantiate the trade's claim of an average 3.2% increase over the relevant period. And the full table can be found on the Office of National Statistics website. Under alternative options considered, the council has followed the necessary legal procedure under the Act to enable the committees to increase the fares as proposed by the trade. It remains open to the committee to decline to do so at this time. Some additional testings of meters will be required under the resource implications by the licensing team on the date of implementation of the proposed fare increases to ensure they are calibrated correctly. This can be completed within our existing resources. Under the legal implications, the power to fix fares is given under Section 65 of the Local Government Miscellaneous Provisions Act 1976. Any representations received must be considered by the committee. Equality and diversity implications. The public sector equality applies to the policy, applies to the council when it makes decisions. A equality impact assessment has been completed and found to be no impacts, either positive or negative, on protected groups as defined under the Equalities Act 2010. The recommendation is to propose that the committee resolves that the application by the trade determines for the fare increases as outlined in Appendix B to this report, taking into account the representations received and the contents of this report. if the committee is minded to approve the proposed increase. It is to be agreed that the implementation date of the increased fares be delegated to the Assistant Director of Peoples and Communities in consultation with the portfolio holder of licensing, and this to be no later than the end of February 2021. And that is the end of the report.
Thank you, Stephen. Councillor Mr Wilkinson, you want to come in on a question?
Thank you, Chairman. It's not a question, it's a couple of points I'd like to make, if I may. The first thing I'm going to say is that I think it goes without saying that we all recognise at these difficult times the need for people to earn money. The taxi business is no different from that, and I sympathise with them. However, I having read the report that Stephen's just gone through, read it beforehand, I've got some real problems with this, I'm afraid. I'd like to draw members' attention to the table that is in paragraph 3.1, and it starts saying that if the committee was minded to accept the trade's proposed fare increase, fares would be affected as set out in the table below. Now, I've worked out that it ranges from a 3.22% increase for 2 miles, which is what they've cited within the report, up to an 8% increase for 4 miles. And most of them being around about the 7.5% increase. That's a massive increase to try and impose on people. And for example, if we look at 4 miles, the trade is proposing 80p increase. It's actually, if we were to look at 3%, which is average at the moment, it should only be 30p. And the longest distance, 20 miles, with the trade want £3.60 increase, it should only be £1.40. And again, which was spoken about by Stephen about the fuel. If I could take members to Appendix C. Appendix C appears to be an email to Stephen from somebody, because it's redacted, and that the whole evidence of this email is based upon fuel price assumptions. And it starts out by saying in 2016 the average price of diesel was £1.11. Up to 20, it's £1.31. So all their calculations are based on that. And in actual fact, as Stephen's rightly said, it's not that anymore. I filled my car yesterday and it's £1.11. And I think sadly for the trade, their application has come at the wrong time. I know that they couldn't help COVID-19, but fuel prices have gone right down. And I think that bearing in mind the additional financial hardship to everybody, not just the taxi industry, but everybody, I think this is an unreasonable request at this time, because I think it's too high. You know, asking for fare increases ranging up to 8% is way beyond any inflation process, and I find it very strange that they're asking for that. So, Chairman, I'm going to be voting against this motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wilkinson. Councillor Mrs Mason.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Before I speak to the report in general, I'd like the officer who has given us a very comprehensive and complex report, and which is a very difficult subject. I'd like to ask him for 2 questions to clarify. One of the members of the public's responses was a claim that the minimum fare was the highest. Now, I've been unable to check that. It's probably hidden in the stats, but I'm not sure if that's an accurate assertion or not. But it's certainly taking the averages on the 2 mile fares, which you've shown up on 3.2. The mean average would be £6, not sorry, not 3.2, it's on a different chart. The mean average would be 6.2, and the average between the highest and the lowest would be £6.15. So we are slightly out of kilter there. So there's just the one question on the minimum fare, a relationship with that with other districts. And the second question is one which I'm quite concerned about. When the survey went out, the survey asked for reasons not to support the fare increase. And there was a questionnaire which said yes, no. But if you answered no, you had to give your reasons. However, if someone answered yes, they should have been given the equal opportunity to give their reasons. We should be given equal weight to residents who are opposed to a potential fare increase as to those that are in favour. And I was concerned that that balance wasn't there. Hopefully that will be done in future, but could the officer, just before I carry on, could he just give me some information about that minimum fare statement?
Yes, yes, I can. I haven't got the starting fares for each of the districts. However, like I say, there is all licensing authorities have to provide the private hire and taxi magazine with what their 2 mile fare is, so that they can have a average across the whole of the UK, which obviously I've highlighted on 5.2. In relation to Rochford being the highest fare in the area, I have included in that report the fare for Southend-on-Sea, which is £6.40 at the 2 miles, and then we have Sells at the moment at £6.20 with the proposal for £6.40, and Castle Point is at £6, Basildon is at £6, and finally Thurrock, if we're currently going across the Thames corridor, is also at £6 as well. So well, I haven't actually got the actual starting fare, but this is certainly what we use in previous consultations, and is sort of used nationally as a good sort of wager to compare us with other authorities. Is that sufficient, or would you like us to try and get some more information?
I think in view of the complexity of the subject and the wealth of information that we've had, and I must admit I've spent time reading and rereading it, but that's more than adequate. Thank you for that. Madam Chairman, I'm concerned here, similar to Councillor Wilkinson, that the average fare is already above the average for the locality. That's my first concern. My second concern here is that the claim for fuel cost made by the trade does not seem to be substantiated by any of the information that we have seen in front of us today, and seems to be overstated at best. The consultation period is significant. We only had 68 responses, and I'm going to hold my hands up here. I was probably notified of this consultation. It didn't register and it passed me by. The period was in lockdown. It's no reflection on our officers. It's an unfortunate situation that's occurred. But having said that, I don't think that's a representative response, which is something that's happened through lockdown. So there is a move at possible deferment or reconsultation, if the proposal was reworked, might be acceptable. But most importantly, the trade inflation figure that they provided was not substantiated by officers, not substantiated by themselves. And as stated in the report, there was no empirical evidence or data provided. I'm concerned that this application, it is not backed up by adequate information, and I will move for refusal. If I have a seconder for that.
Okay, I'm happy
Anybody
to
second? Okay, Councillor Hoy, you're seconding that. Okay, thank you. Sonia, where do I go from here? Do I ask other? I've still got 3 more people want to talk.
Councillor Mrs. Weston, I think because Councillor Hoy has seconded it, if you could go to Councillor Hoy, please.
Councillor Hoy.
So thank you. Yes, but obviously we're now talking to the motion for deferral. I think
Refusal.
Refusal, Councillor Hoy.
Councillor Mrs. Mason moved for deferral, I thought.
No, she moved for refusal.
Right, okay, I'm getting very confused. I'm sure I heard the word refusal because I thought.
Do you agree? Are you seconding Mrs. Mason?
I moved refusal. I thought to start with, and didn't get a second. So
If
Are you agreeing with
I'm happy to move the motion to refuse if Councillor Hoy's not.
Councillor Hoy?
well, I'm just trying to do this properly because it's quite important. I thought Councillor Wilkinson had moved refusal already, but hadn't been seconded.
No, I hadn't moved a motion, Councillor Hoy. I just indicated my intentions.
What you said then.
No, that's all right. I just indicated my intentions. Mrs. Mason moved the motion.
It really matter either way. I just misheard both of you. The refusal. To be honest, they're quite similar in many ways because this wouldn't be implemented until much later anyway. I have concerns around the pricing. I'd also worked out the same percentages as Councillor Wilkinson. It does seem quite a lot. I'd also had concerns around the spoilage. Can someone explain what the spoilage is? £100 charge to be reintroduced? Is this if there is damage to the taxi? I'd like an answer to that one as well. And I think the consultation in itself would be flawed by no fault of the officers because of the point of time it took place. And obviously, fuel prices were falling anyway prior to the pandemic taking hold, and obviously have dropped since, although they seem to now have stabilised. And I think some of the data on this, which whatever the data is, because it's not been supplied, is dubious. If I can just have an answer about spoilage, I'll be grateful. Thank you.
Stephen, before we go on to Stephen, I've got two more other members. Can I take them first, and perhaps you can answer the questions at the same time? Councillor FD, please.
Thank you, Councillor Weston. I've got 3 points. One is that 56% of taxi drivers actually responded to them actually having a pay rise, and 15% of them said they basically didn't want a pay rise. So really, only 41% of the taxi drivers actually said they would actually like a pay rise. So it's not even over half of them have actually said they actually want to charge more money. The second one is, some people enjoy going in taxis, but people use taxis because they have to use taxis. And I feel that public transport is especially going to be cut, especially out right out in the countryside where I am and other places, because people just lack of use of it at the moment. And also with the fuel, we can't really have an opinion on the fuel because the price of fuel goes up and down all the time. It's market, happens with the market. But what we can say with fuel, it's cheaper to do longer journeys than it is to do lots of small stops. So really, with the percentage, I think the percentage should not go up with the longer journeys, or even actually go down, because it's actually saving money when they're doing longer journeys. And I cannot support this for those reasons. And that's me. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor FD. Councillor Mrs. Shaw, please.
Thank you, Carol. Yeah, I agree with what most has been said, because fuel charge and the figures don't add up what has been given on this report. So I would go with refusal on this, and perhaps we could get a better up-to-date report when it comes, if it comes through again. This isn't against Stephen, I appreciate, because it's he's had to work with the figures that he's got, but because it's COVID, everything's up in the air, and I don't think we should be allowing our taxis to put up the prices just because they want to, and they're not actually justified why. That's my opinion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Mrs. Shaw. Stephen, can you answer Councillor Mr. Hoy's question, please? Thank you.
Yes, just in relation to the spoilage, it relates to if someone is sick or ill inside a vehicle, obviously the driver then has to go away to go and get the vehicle cleaned. That obviously could take them out of work, especially on sort of a Friday or Saturday night. So we previously had a spoilage in there, not in the current fare increase, because the current fare table, it says at the discretion of the driver. The actual trade wanted an actual fixed amount in there rather than leaving it open to interpretation. Does that help?
Yes, thank you. How does that compare to other authorities?
I don't have that information. It's not something that is openly sort of publicised but it's quite common across the trades to have a fixed amount. It was previously at £75 on our previous fare table before we changed it to the discretion. So £100 would be in average about the same as what you would expect.
Thank you, Steve. Councillor Mrs McPherson, please, last question.
Thank you, Chairman. It's probably more of a question to officers. I agree with a lot of the comments, and I wondered if this could not be deferred for a period of time for a further review post, you know, the sort of the situation we're in at the moment. With
Order, we should be discussing the motion on the table.
Well, if an officer can ask, if they answer me, please, if that's okay, Councillor.
It's a point of order.
So, Councillor Mrs McPherson, we are debating a motion for refusal. We have to deal with that first.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Sonia.
Okay, members, there's a motion on the table to refuse this item. Sonia, if you'd like to do the prelims, please.
Councillor Mrs Mason is indicating, does she want to speak?
Sorry, Councillor Mrs Mason, did you want to?
Yes, it's customary to be allowed to come back at the end as I propose the motion to come back. So if you'll just bear with me, I am moving for refusal. I do realise that there are concerns with the taxi trade and we are all aware of them. However, it is up to the trade to provide a justification for an increase, and in my view that hasn't been done, which is why the motion is for refusal. Should they at some further time provide information, I don't think it's up to our officers to provide information for the trade. They respond to the information that's given to them, is my understanding, which is why I didn't move for deferral but for refusal. So that's just for a point of clarification, but the motion is still for refusal. Thank you.
Councillor Mrs Mason. Okay, members, so we've got a motion on the table by Councillor Mrs Mason, seconded by Councillor Mr Hoy. Sonia, if you'd like to. Thank you.
Okay. So Councillor FD, would you like a recorded vote, or do you want to vote for, against, or abstain for the motion to refuse?
No recorded vote and for the motion to refuse.
Okay. Councillor Mrs Gooding, recorded vote, for, against, or abstain?
No recorded vote and for the motion. Thank you.
Councillor Hoy, recorded vote, for, against, or abstain?
Against recorded vote for the motion.
Thank you. Councillor Lucas Gill, recorded vote, for, against, or abstain?
No recorded vote for the motion.
Thank you. Councillor Mrs McPherson, recorded vote, for, against, or abstain?
Against a recorded vote and for the motion. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Mrs Mason, recorded vote, for, against, or abstain?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Against a recorded vote, there's no need, and for the motion, obviously. Thank you.
Councillor Merrick, recorded vote, for, against, or abstain?
No recorded vote for the motion.
Councillor Mrs Shaw, recorded vote, for, against, or abstain?
Sorry, no recorded vote for the motion.
Thank you. Councillor Shaw.
No recorded vote for the motion.
Thank you. Councillor Mrs Weston.
No recorded vote, and I'm abstaining, please.
Okay. Councillor Wilkinson.
No recorded vote and for the motion.
Thank you. Councillor Williams.
No recorded vote and for the refusal. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, members, that was 11 for the motion and 1 abstention. Thank you for that. So the next one is, so item 7 is the flexibility to private hire vehicle conditions due to the COVID-19. And I think, Stephen, you're going to do this one again, please. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much. This is a report for the committee to determine whether to allow an extension of 1 year for those vehicles listed in paragraph 4.1 of this report. On 21st of May.
This says that this will be P&C, this item.
Why is it in P&C? Sorry, Councillor.
That's what it says on the agenda.
Sonia?
Councillor Lucas-Gill, could you please state your reason as to why you think this should be in private and confidential? There's nothing in here. The information that's provided is all generic. So there's
on the agenda it says press and public be excluded.
Excluded, yeah.
Well, this is not a private and confidential. It's not an exempt item. All of the information in it is publicly available. So there is no reason for us to go into exempt, and to exclude the press and public.
So there's an error on the agenda then.
Indeed.
Thank you, Councillor Mike Lucas-Gill.
Okay, thank you.
Right, Sonia, we can carry on with this. Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Stephen.
That's okay. On the 21st of May 2020, David Milligan, the company director of Access Anyone, requested some flexibility to the current conditions in relation to the vehicle requirements agreed by the Appeals Committee. Access Anyone runs a school contract with Southend Borough Council. Currently, the operations management of the contract is being transferred to a newly formed partnership between Southend Borough Council and an independent company called London Hire. The joint partnership is called Vecto. The transition, coupled with COVID-19 situation, has made the plans moving forward more problematic, and as a result, Southend Borough Council has approached Access Anyone to extend their current contract for a further year until July 2021. This contract with Southend Borough Council exceeds 30,000. The fleet of licensed private hire vehicles by Access Anyone is now aging, with 3 of the vehicles reaching the vehicle's age requiring the vehicle replacement by the licensing team before the next renewal. To allow Access Anyone to meet the demands of the contract, they have requested an extension of 1 year for those vehicles that should be replaced. Due to the shortness of the extension and the clarity as to the Vectoria's plans moving forward, it is not viable to invest in replacing rolling stock at this junction. Should a more expensive contract be offered, they would be at this point to make the necessary investment to replace the vehicles. Hackney Carriage and Private Hire driver, vehicle and operators licence conditions 103.18 of the Hackney Carriage condition states the vehicle must be no more than 6 years old when first licensed and will not be re-licensed if more than 12 years old from the date of registration. 4.1 outlines the details of the fleet of the vehicles owned by Access Anyone, and the 3 highlighted vehicles are the vehicles this report relates to. The alternative options available to the members was to refuse the extension for the vehicles. Access Anyone would have to consider whether they can meet the requirements of the contract with fewer vehicles. Risk implications. The only risk identified relates to the age of the vehicles. It needs to be acknowledged that aging vehicles are more prone to breakdowns. However, in order to minimise the risk, Access Anyone has confirmed they carry out preventative maintenance checks on these vehicles at 10 weekly intervals, in addition to MOTs being carried out on the vehicles at 6 monthly intervals. A copy of the maintenance check report is attached. There is no resource implications in respect of this decision. There is no legal implications to this isolated request. This request is being considered due to extreme circumstances and is considered on its own merit and will not impact on any other licensed driver or vehicle.
Excuse me, can I just come in? Arthur Williams has just rung me. He's had to leave the meeting.
Thank you, Councillor Shaw.
In relation to equality and diversity implications, this decision relates to the transportation of children to and from school with disabilities. The decision of the committee will impact on the number of vehicles available to the school for the safe passage of their students. By reducing the number of vehicles within the Access Anyone fleet, the number of students able to access school would be decreased, or for them to find alternative means of transport to the school. The recommendation is to propose that the committee resolves to grant the request by Access Anyone to license the vehicles for an extension for a 1 year beyond the requirements outlined within condition 103.18. And that's the end of the report.
Thank you, Stephen. Councillor Mr Wilkinson, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Right, I've got a question which has arisen. I've got a question for Stephen, actually, Chairman, if that's okay, which has arisen from my concern over reading this report. I think it doesn't take. I think we all understand the pressures that perhaps this company is put under, and their reasons for trying what they're trying here. But my concern is that there are guidelines and rules that are in place with regard to the age of vehicles for a reason. Those reasons primarily are around safety of the passengers, maintenance, etc. We're not just talking about transportation of anybody here. We're talking about the transportation of vulnerable children and vulnerable members of society. And so what they're actually asking us to do is to authorise them to continue using vehicles that are older than the guidelines would ordinarily permit them to do to carry vulnerable people, which is where I have a problem with this. And it appears to be born when you read further into the report and they talk about their contract, and if they get more of a contract, they'll start investing in this, that, and the other. It appears to be born out of a financial concern, understandably, I might add, as opposed to one of safety. And with a huge respect to this particular company, I'm more interested in the safety of their passengers than I am of their financial situation. So I've got a real concern about this, and perhaps, Chairman, I could just ask Stephen Green a question about this, because if we as members agree to this extension, and God forbid there was an incident that were to happen with one of those vehicles, which cause injury, stress, or otherwise, what implication would that have to Rutchford District Council? What would we be opening ourselves up to? The fact that we have authorised them to use these vehicles that are beyond the age we would normally have done, purely out of financial reasons for that company. I think we might be opening ourselves up to a bit of criticism there, and I just wonder if you might know the answer to that.
It is a difficult question, to be honest, as to what implications it could have on the council. Yes, that obviously we've set the age of the vehicles for a reason, which, as you pointed out, that we have to make sure that the transportation of the public is our paramount priority, to make sure that we do safeguard those. In relation to the age of vehicles, there has been a lot of questions in the past around age of vehicles and whether a vehicle that is aged 11 years and 6 months is any safer than a vehicle that is 12 years and 3 months. So there has been legal challenges, but we felt that an age of 12 is a suitable vehicle, a suitable age for a private hire vehicle. So we also include within that 12 years is also the limousines, the chauffeur vehicles. It's not just sort of school contract vehicles. In relation to this decision, I believe that you would be able to imply any sort of other sort of conditions or rules that you would like them to also comply with to make sure that obviously we ensure the paramount safety of the public. As they have included, they do have additional checks above and beyond what we expect of any other private hire vehicle by conducting the 10 weekly checks, and that is done by a external partner and an external company. If something went wrong in relation to injury to the public, yes, then there will be scrutiny around the decision making from either the health and safety executive or obviously more towards the company as to what measures they had put in place to safeguard the public. The decision would be considered, but I think the onus is more upon the company themselves rather than Rochester District Council. But I think that there certainly will be a question that being asked of the council as to why it was approved.
Chairman, would you mind if I just come back with one quick
Yes, carry
point?
on. Yes, no problem.
Thank you. Thank you for answering that, Stephen. I think that's very helpful. My observation from reading it is that they are basically saying, if you don't approve this, then some children are going to go without transport, which I think is really unfair. What they're doing is they're turning the onus, they're putting it on us. The guideline, you know, they've set themselves up as a business to do what they're doing, and for whatever reason they now can't afford to do it. So what they're doing is they want us to bend the rules for them, and if we don't, then children are going to suffer. And that's the way I read it. And at this moment in time, I'm not in favour of it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. Councillor Mr. Hoy.
Thank you, Chairman. I agree with Councillor Wilkinson on this. Sorry, I nearly got your name wrong. To me, it just seems they've got themselves in a commercial hole by agreeing a 1-year extension, realised 3 of their vehicles won't qualify because of their age, and are now hunting around for ways to get around it. I can see no reason why they couldn't do a year's lease on a vehicle. They're quite common, and that would fill the hole. I'm very uncomfortable with relaxing our standards, and I was very concerned with the statement made by Stephen Greener that it wouldn't affect any, I can't remember your wording, but any other licensed cab, I think is effectively what you were saying. And I don't see why we're making a policy just for one company. I assume you're saying it won't affect anyone else because no one else has vehicles of an age which would be affected by. So that's the first question. The second question is around what we're actually agreeing, if it was agreed, which I can't agree. Is it beyond the 1 year? So we're going to agree an extension of 1 year beyond the requirements outlined within condition 103.18. That is mentioned in paragraph, I can't find it now, 3. So 3. And this is the issue. So 3.1 says about condition and 3.2 is the condition. So the condition is the vehicle must not be more than 6 years old when first licensed and will not be re-licensed if more than 12 years old from the date of registration. So although the report is worded as though we're just changing the last bit of that, we're actually changing the first bit as well. So by agreeing a 1 year extension to 103.18, we're also saying that vehicles must not be more than 7 years old now. And I don't think that's the intention of this report, because that then would affect other licensed cabs. There's people with a vehicle between 6 and 7 years who could now license the cab, which I'm sure wasn't the intention from new. So they're my two questions need answering, and at this moment I can't support the recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hoy. Stephen, do you want to answer those questions, please?
Yes, in relation to the comment that I added in there in relation to legal implications, it was because the work that is provided by Access Anyone is very, very bespoke. The vehicles that have been listed in 4.1 are wheelchair accessible vehicles that are not the standard sort of cars. They are very large, as you can see, Renault Master vehicles to transport wheelchair users, people with mobility issues. They have got tailgate ramps, which you don't find on normal sort of private hire vehicles, and also a lot of the other sort of school contract vehicles. Like I say, they are very bespoke, and that's why in the report I actually put in there that this wouldn't actually have any impact on any other licensed vehicles or drivers because of the structure of their business and the nature of their business. In relation to the condition outlined on 3.2, the proposal is not to change anything in relation to the 6 years old aspect, it's purely that they're asking to extend on those 3 vehicles to take it from 12 years up to 13 years is the proposal or the request by the company.
Yeah, if I can come back on that, one is the recommendation as it's written would not do that. That would also extend the 6-year one as well. I think that's quite clear for everyone to read. It doesn't specify the 12-year rule. It specifies the condition in 103.18. And if you're just saying that within the 1 year beyond the requirements outlined, it is clearly both is changing. So I can't support it on that basis. At this point, I'd like to move refusal on the points I've raised. I don't know if anyone wants to second that.
I'll second that, Chairman.
Okay, thank you. So we've got a motion to refuse, seconded by Councillor Mike Wilkinson. Can we just carry on? Councillor Mrs. Shaw, do you have a question at all?
Yes, I do. I was reading the report like all of us have, and the inspection report really highlighted some problems. As it's been noted that we are taking children on these, there's the efficiency of the service brake performance is only 68%. And what else was there? The handbrake needed to be repaired. So these vehicles, I'm sure if I took my vehicle in, I wouldn't be able to drive it for an MOT because things were wrong. But we're asking, they're asking us to approve vehicles that aren't really roadworthy, and it's going to be, as other members have said, dangerous it could potentially be dangerous for the children to travel in.
Councillor Mrs.
I will refuse it. I go for refusal.
Councillor Mrs. Mason, please.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I think we all are concerned over this for more than one reason. We're concerned because the company is put in a difficult situation, and we're concerned over the fact that we're effectively being given a situation where we either approve this so that the children can go to school in a vehicle that would not normally be satisfactory to our standards, albeit I do recognise that the firm has gone over and above to try and mitigate that by saying they'll do 6 monthly MOTs and 10 weekly services. Or we have the other problem that if we refuse it, there's a possibility that these children, they're probably some of the most vulnerable children as well, won't be able to access their schools. But when it comes down to the main reason for this, the reason for this is because Southend Borough Council have failed to negotiate a contract that is acceptable because they're changing their procurement. Now, that is not a reason for us to make exceptions. So whilst I have every sympathy with the company and every sympathy with the people that may be affected by the decision, I certainly will support the refusal because we should not be making a decision on safety on commercial lines. So I certainly will support Councillor Hoy, the motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Mrs. Mason. Councillor Mrs. Gooding, please.
I would wholeheartedly endorse all those points that have been made. We cannot possibly change the rules even when we've got such vulnerable children going into vehicles. We just can't do that. So I would be against and support what Councillor Hoy has put forward.
Councillor Mrs. Gooding. Councillor FD, please.
Thank you, Councillor Weston. I'm a slightly different opinion here. I'm of the opinion that vehicles go through MOTs. These vehicles are 12 years old, so they've gone through 8 MOTs, and I'm sure they've been completely refitted with brakes, handbrakes, everything else that they need to have to be a safe vehicle for roadworthiness. I feel that they're doing a 10 weekly check on these vehicles. They're doing 2 MOTs a year. I think they're going above and beyond what is legally required for having a vehicle on the road. I do understand that there's children going to be in there, but I think there's impact on these children getting to school where a lot of children haven't been able to go to school for months now. So I differ on this. I would actually support this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor FD. Councillor Mrs McPherson, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, I do know Access Anyone quite well and the services they provide. I would like to ask under 6.2, under the risk implications, it does say, however, in order to minimise this risk, Access Anyone has confirmed they carry out preventative maintenance checks on these vehicles at 10 weekly intervals. Is there any way that this will be checked or followed up? If the officer could advise, please.
Thank you. Stephen, can you answer that, please?
Yes, if requested by yourselves, we can actually insist that they forward a copy of those 10 weekly checks to ourselves, and we can obviously then have a look at them, and obviously then we can flag up if there's any sort of concerns. So yes, we can ask for those checks to be presented to us.
Can I come back?
Yes, Councillor Mrs McPherson.
Should this go forward, I would like that added as a recommendation, please.
Thank you, Mrs McPherson. We do have a motion on the table at the moment. Okay, councillors, anybody else want to speak on this? Okay, but we have a motion on the table to refuse by Councillor Hoy. Seconded. Sorry, Sonia.
Yeah, Councillor Lucas Gill, I think, was indicating.
Oh, sorry, I haven't seen that one. Councillor Lucas Gill, did you want to have a word? I think he's frozen. Councillor Lucas Gill? Your mic's still on, off, Councillor.
Sorry, my system is playing up, unfortunately, but I have to agree with everything that Councillor FD has said. I do feel that with all these extra checks, that the vehicles will be quite safe to use. So I cannot support the motion to refuse.
Thank you, Councillor Lucas Gill. Okay, so we have a motion on the table to refuse, seconded by Councillor Wilkinson. Members will take a vote. Sonia, do you want to do the limbs, please?
Councillor FD, recorded vote for, against or abstain for the motion to refuse.
No recorded vote. Trying to work out. So against the motion to refuse.
Thank you. Councillor Mrs Gooding.
No recorded vote, and I am for the motion to refuse.
Councillor Hoy.
Against the recorded vote and for the motion.
Councillor Lucas Gill.
No to a recorded vote and against the motion.
Thank you. Councillor Mrs McPherson.
Against a recorded vote and against the current motion.
Councillor Mrs Mason.
No recorded vote and for the motion for refusal.
Councillor Merrick.
Against the recorded vote and against the motion.
Could you repeat that, please?
Against the recorded vote and against the motion for refusal.
Against, thank you. Councillor Mrs Shaw.
No recorded vote and for the motion.
Thank you. Councillor Shaw.
Against recorded vote for the motion.
Councillor Mrs Weston.
No recorded vote and abstain, please.
Councillor Wilkinson.
No recorded vote and for the motion.
Six for the motion, 4 against the motion, 1 abstention. So that is carried for refusal. I think that concludes the meeting, if I'm correct. Thank everybody for attending the meeting, and we close the meeting now at 11:25.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Raj. Thank you.